Okay, so this reading will be for Wednesday, November 4th, 1987 at 1:05 p.m. in Washington, D.C. So this means you have Sun in Scorpio. Moon is in Taurus, but if your birth time is even just a little bit different, if your birth time was a little bit earlier, even maybe 10 or 15 minutes earlier, you would have Moon in Aries. That would be very different. So I just wanted to point that out there. But Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Taurus with Aquarius rising. So the first thing I noticed here was, I remember you saying in your email that you don't quite relate to online descriptions. I'm not sure if those descriptions are just for Scorpio Sun or if they're for other placements that you have. But it definitely makes sense to me why you wouldn't relate to descriptions of Scorpio, because you do have Sun in Scorpio, and Sun is even conjunct Pluto, which would in some ways make the dynamic more scorpionic and intense like that. But you have no other planets in Scorpio. Most people have Mercury in the same sign as their sun, but some people like yourself don't. So that does tend to make that person lean a little bit, sometimes more toward their Mercury sign. Your Mercury is in Libra, which is very different than Scorpio, of course. And then your Mars and your South Node are also in Libra. And then your Moon is in Taurus, which is directly opposite Scorpio. Your Moon doesn't directly oppose your Sun by aspect, but your Moon is in Taurus, which is, opposite Scorpio. So, and then even your Venus is in Sagittarius at 0 degrees. So, in other words, because you have so many of these placements in Libra, Taurus, Sagittarius, Aquarius, with your rising, these are all very different than Scorpio. So you may relate to some traits of Scorpio, but what I've found is that probably the most distinctive trait of Scorpio would be the emotional intensity, and a lot of the other aspects of people who have strong Scorpio placements, a lot of their traits and themes that they deal with revolve around that intense emotion. And I think for the most part, that wouldn't be something that you would relate to. Having Moon in Taurus means that you'd be very grounded emotionally, pretty stable, pretty even keel. And then adding these Libra placements, Libra, Mercury, Mars, and South Node would reinforce that as well. The combination of these Libra placements with your Aquarius rising, these are all air placements. So these mean that you are kind of detached, easygoing, go with the flow. Very different than this, kind of rigid intensity that we are typically familiar with Scorpio. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know if you were reading descriptions of Scorpio, but if you were, it definitely makes sense to me why you wouldn't relate to Scorpio, because, you may still have some traits of Scorpio. You do have your sun there, of course, so that does still mean something. But if I had to pick one sign, to characterize you more than any others, I would say Libra, because of your Mercury, Mars, and South Node there. Those are all pretty important placements for personality and themes that you deal with. And then Taurus and Moon and Taurus, I would say the Moon kind of dictates a lot of what we deal with, probably more so even than the Sun as well. Both Taurus and Libra are ruled by Venus, so having so many of your placements in these two signs, again means that you kind of have a gentle charisma and easygoing charisma about you. Others may find you easy to be around, comfortable to be around. You have a pleasant kind of aura, so that's nice. A lot of this, I think, has to do with just being easygoing and go with the flow. Moon in Taurus is rigid in the sense that you very much know your boundaries. Right and wrong. In some ways, you can view some of these things kind of black and white. So there is a little bit of rigidity there, but for the most part, you're pretty easygoing. You can kind of go with whatever the people around you are doing. So this kind of malleability makes you attractive for a wide variety of people, if that makes sense. And again, that's very different than most Scorpio people. Most Scorpio people with strong placements in Scorpio would they're very much looking for something like in particular, and it's I don't know, it's much more kind of intense and different. let's see. There is this kind of juxtaposition. On the one hand, with Moon and Scorpio, things would be somewhat black and white. You can see things in kind of a simple way, especially emotionally. Your emotions are very grounded, and there's a kind of sacred simplicity there. But on the other hand, having Mercury in Libra and South Node and Mars there means that you can sometimes like overthink things too, and that's another difference from between you and how most people with Scorpio placements experience things. Their experience, people with strong Scorpio placements can be very analytical, very intelligent or intellectual, but they fundamentally operate from a place of emotion and intuition. And for you, I think you would be much more rational in nature. You'd prefer to just kind of analyze things and, analyze things from a semi purely intellectual standpoint or perspective, if that makes sense. Because we're combining Mercury, Mars, and South Node in Libra, so very rational thinking. Is it this way or that way? Is it this way or that way? Very much, you'd be very much taking many variables into account, even for the most basic decisions. That's why people with Libra placements are seen as indecisive, especially when you're working with other people. Because let's say you're in a group setting and someone asks you what you want to do, or where you want to eat, where you want to go. The answer for you is not so simple, because what you want is what other people want. You have this high empathy, so you want whatever would be best for the group, and whatever would create the best kind of chemistry or vibes there. So that's why some of these decisions, although they may seem very simple for other people, for you may be complicated, because you have to try to read other people, which you're probably very good at, understanding and reading other people. But it just becomes so much more chaotic and confusing when you have to take so many variables into account, especially dealing with other people, which are fundamentally unpredictable. But anyway, I think my point was just having these strong Libra placements, there's a lot of thinking about things, thinking about this way, that way, kind of going back and forth, and then combining that dynamic with Moon and Taurus. Moon and Taurus indicates that you're not gonna be really invested in anything mentally or emotionally unless it truly makes sense on a very kind of basic level. You like it when things are kind of tied into the five senses. You want to keep things practical. Where is this going? Where is this going? What value does this have? Whether it's a person, a situation, an idea, a feeling, you would have that immediate kind of foresight, and I guess you could call it an intuition of being, very practical and down to earth, And again, that's very different. That's another big difference from, Scorpio, how Scorpio usually is. I've known many people with Sun in Scorpio and Moon in Taurus, and they're actually one of the most kind of stable and grounded combinations, I would say, which is, again, very unusual for Scorpio. Usually, typically Scorpio wants to be perceived as stable, but inside it's, kind of this raging battle, and there's extremes there. But for you, I would speculate you would be seen as, and truly be, very stable. So your relationships, your jobs may last, many years, because that's just kind of your approach. You have a steady, stabilizing approach to things. And part of it, I think probably most of it has, ties back to the Taurus moon, perceiving things from a very practical, down to earth kind of way, and then approaching things from that modality, I guess you could say. Okay, let's look around though. We talked about your sun and moon a little bit, and your Libra placements. I do want to stress the Libra though. Many astrologers, don't really look at the South Node a lot, but the South Node does have a lot to do, not only with your past, where you come from, past lives, things like that, which we'll talk about later, but also just, they have a lot to do with traits and strengths that we have that are innate. So having South Node in Libra along with Mercury and Mars, it means, a lot of your essence is in Libra. Um, what and South Node in Libra. So okay, so going off of the strengths of having South Node in Libra, this means that you're good at Libra type things. So you'd be really excellent when it comes to design, aesthetics. I feel like that's pretty ubiquitous with those who have strong Libra placements. You can always tell when you walk into a room and it's very fashionable. Everything's kind of perfect looking. I can usually kind of glean that there's some kind of person with Libra placements that was involved in the creation of that atmosphere, that type of thing. You'd be really excellent with design, aesthetics, things of that nature. Also having South Node in Libra, you'd be excellent with people. We talked about that a little bit. Excellent with understanding people, and even having Sun and Scorpio with Moon and Taurus, there's a little bit of intuition and feeling that come with those placements as well. So combining that with the rational, I'm always searching for words in these readings. The rational abilities, let's just say, of Libra, combining the intuition of Scorpio with the pragmatism of Taurus, with the rational mind of Libra and empathy of Libra would make you very excellent when it comes to reading other people, knowing social expectations or mannerisms. I'd speculate you're probably very polite, things like that. But not just polite, you'd be really excellent when it comes to interacting with others. So you may be an excellent diplomat, you may be excellent at customer service, social relations, hospitality, things like that. That's another huge strength that comes with South Node and Libra. But like I said, I think it really is even more strengthened by your other placements too. Mars in Libra is interesting because it's in detriment. Excuse me. Mars is our drive, our ambition. It's how we assert ourselves. It's also how we respond to conflict. And, ideally in a kind of basic, perfect world, we would all, in all those areas I just listed, we'd be very, very assertive, very direct. We'd start things head on and, hit the confrontational situation head on. But with Mars and Libra, it's in detriment. It's very different. So the way you would assert yourself or respond to critical situations would actually be almost kind of backward or opposite than what would be expected. So rather than panicking, freaking out, fighting, you would almost kind of go offline. You would detach more and actually become more logical. And this has a lot of strengths and challenges to it. Which should we talk about first? Let's talk about the challenges first. So the challenge is, having detriment placements like this makes you misunderstood. So when there is some kind of critical situation, you may not immediately respond, and so others may misunderstand that and think you either don't care about the situation or are completely oblivious to it. When in reality, you may perceive whatever's going on. It's just that you are, you instinctively choose to respond to the situation from a detached mental, you prefer to think things through before you act, even though this kind of critical situation, most people would act right away instinctively. Your instinct is not to react. Your instinct is to wait and think about what's happening. So that is, in many ways very challenging and potentially problematic. You may miss out on certain opportunities which may have required an immediate response. What else? Also, sometimes you may have delayed reactions to critical situations too. So that's unfortunate. It can be very frustrating, when there's a critical situation, and by that I mean someone fighting with you or, being overbearing with you. You may not even react emotionally until much later. And so, by the time you actually have these feelings that you want to release, that most people would release in the moment, right away, you may have them later when, what do you do with it later? It can be difficult to know what to do with those feelings, or how to release them, kind of. What else? I think those are the main challenges. This can be a really beautiful placement, though. Not panicking, not freaking out in the moment, and remaining calm, and maybe even becoming hyper logical, and thinking that much more quickly, analyzing even more. That can be a huge strength too. You can be the one person in a group that remains logical and proceeds from a place of logic rather than just flying into rage or fear or whatever. You know what I mean? So that can be a huge strength. Others may not understand it, but they can respect it if you can use it to your advantage. What else? I think that's the main strength, just being able to be cool and detached in the moment and think your way through situations. And then also, sometimes it may behoove you to not act in the moment and rather proceed from a logical standpoint, and maybe proceed from a strategic standpoint, and maybe act later in a way that's more sophisticated or more intelligent, more rewarding for yourself or others. Things like that. So that is a interesting placement for sure. Since we're in this kind of area of your chart, let's talk about Mercury real quick. So I already talked about Mercury's how we think and communicate. It's the intellect. For you, this is in Libra, so you're very much very rational, very intellectual, constantly kind of thinking and analyzing, weighing the pros and cons of even very trivial decisions, because you just naturally take in many variables into account. You take in, rather than just thinking about what you want to do in the moment, you think, how will this affect the long term? How will this affect other people? What do other people want? What would other people think of this? So that in itself can be really overwhelming and frustrating, I think, but it can also be very advantageous. It can, typically people who have placements like this are very kind of calm, or they at least seem calm. They they come from a place of like rationality, and I think in many ways it not always is, but oftentimes it seems very mature to operate from this type of way, because you naturally think before you act. Basically, you're not one to just rush into something and say something you don't mean, or so others can trust that if you're saying something or doing something, you've thought about it beforehand, and you're almost all the time that you're truly invested in what you're doing, maybe a little bit more so than like other people. What's interesting is Mercury is retrograde in your chart. This is pretty rare, I would say. I've read that about 13% of the population has Mercury retrograde in their chart. So because Mercury's retrograde, this makes your thinking process even more kind of internal and unique. With Mercury retrograde, oftentimes you'll have very unique views on things. You're an independent thinker. You'd really think for yourself. Mercury is also in the 9th house, which has to do with higher learning. So this means that you're Mercury retrograde in 9th house Libra. This means that you're really interested in pondering some really abstract and kind of complex ideas. You may really enjoy, going to university. But I always say, historically 9th house had to do with the church, because that's where everyone went for their higher learning. And nowadays I think you have more options. You can, go to the church if you're into that. You can go to the, university would probably be the most, traditional form of higher learning now. But you can also go to nature, you can go online, or whatever. You can, wherever you go for your higher learning, this will be an important place for you in this life, because having Mercury the way it is in your chart, you're very much invested and interested in not just learning for a job, or going to school so you can make money or something like that, but you're truly interested in learning about the way the world works. You want to understand philosophy and metaphysics, and it's not surprising that you're interested in astrology. Of course, I have to say, almost, the vast, maybe a majority of the birth chart readings I do are for people who have Scorpio sun. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, Mercury, where it is as well, very much interested in philosophy and higher learning. And also, those who have Mercury retrograde often can be misunderstood because, the way you think and communicate is unique to. Okay, my microphone decided to just stop working, so I apologize. But I caught it pretty quick. What I was just talking about was Mercury retrograde. So the way you think and communicate is unique to yourself. It's very different than how others think and communicate and learn. So on the one hand, this can be challenging, especially like in school, for example, where it's very linear, I would say. Everything's taught in a very linear kind of way, A to B to C to D. The way you learn may be different. It may be, C to A to D to B. You're kind of jumping all over the place, at least from the perspective of others. And you're having Mercury retrograde also makes you very intuitive. So the way, you can very easily access these more subconscious states of mind, I think. And so this is part of what allows you to learn from a kind of very different or unexpected way. So on the one hand, this can be very challenging, like in school, for example, where everything is a very particular kind of way. And some people with Mercury retrograde, especially if the way it is in a chart, yours doesn't look really difficult the way it's positioned, but some people can struggle. They may have learning disabilities or speech impediments with Mercury retrograde. But on the other hand, I do think that your odds of being a genius are higher with Mercury retrograde as well because of that unique perspective with learning and thinking. You may, to me, on a subjective level, I find those who have Mercury retrograde in their charts, I find those people particularly interesting to talk to because they have such unique viewpoints. They, they may have an opinion or information that is, unique or rare. So I think there's a lot of value there, I guess. That's just my, personal opinion. But yeah, you yourself with Mercury retrograde, this can be very advantageous with, having strong intuition. This can make you a more spiritual person. And having Mercury retrograde in Libra, where you have it, makes you, really excellent at, again, taking into account all the variables and thinking about, the far, thinking holistically, thinking about the entire group, not just, a group of people that you're with, but really thinking about, how do we fit in with the cosmos and society and things like that. So it gets very abstract. It gets very, that's why others may not always understand the way you are mentally, the way you communicate and think and learn. Okay, really interesting stuff though. I think I already mentioned this, but I just want to add that, Mercury retrograde in ninth house, this definitely increases the chance of you being interested in metaphysics, spirituality, astrology, things like that. And I'm just saying that from a place of, I don't know, I think that's a thing with Mercury retrograde. They say it makes you more spiritual, more intuitive, things like that. And then ninth house is, of course, about higher learning. So, okay. What else do I want to talk about before getting deeper into the reading? Let's move forward. So let's talk about your past life experiences, and then your upbringing in this life and some major challenges in this life, and then where you're going from there. Okay, so you do have South Node in 8th house Libra. We talked about that a little bit and how it affects, some major strengths that you have in this life. South Node in Libra indicates that in a past life, you had to be selfless. You had to completely put your own needs, thoughts, opinions on the back burner in order to serve or help someone else. And this may have happened in many different ways. I don't have specifics, unfortunately, but I don't know if it was like I'm picturing like a marriage where you had to completely, dedicate yourself to this other person, or I don't know if you were a servant, some kind of helper, or what are they called, like a consultant or something, where you were some kind of situation though that was so extreme you had to completely um, focus on someone else or other people in some kind of way. So you were extremely attentive. You could have been like a nurse too, or something like that. You'd be extremely attentive, extremely observant, extremely focused on other people. This may sound familiar to you, I think. So in this life, that's why you have certain strengths in this area. That's why you are naturally so observant and excellent with reading other people and anticipating the needs of others, things of that nature, because you've done this in the past life. You've focused a lot on this, especially because the way South Node is in 8th house. This has also to do with other people, investing in other people. So that coming into this life, this does make you kind of selfless in a way. This increases the odds of you being, an empath. Oftentimes, the needs and feelings of other people may be more apparent to you than your own needs and feelings, and that can be advantageous in some ways, but I think for the most part it's dysfunctional. It can be very difficult for you and even for other people, because if other people don't know where you stand, they may completely they may kind of step on your toes without even realizing. That may not be their intention, but because you don't you may not naturally express your feelings or needs, others are just completely unaware. I think also something common with Libra placements in general, just to kind of go on a tangent here really quick, oftentimes you come across so engaged with other people, and you do all the right things to show that you're listening and that you understand. Others may think that you are more interested in what they're saying than you actually are, and others may perceive you as being on their side and agreeing with them, even when you may not actually agree with them. You may be thinking, this person's crazy. I don't know what people with strong Libra placements think, but I just know that you may not really fully agree with someone at all, but you can still be displaying all the signs of someone who is in agreement. So again, that's just an example of others, an example of, I just had it and it slipped away. An example of you just being more naturally focused on other people and, filling in whatever is expected of you rather than expressing what's truly going on with you, or what's going on with your feelings and needs, things like that. All this is because of these past lives where you delved into those themes. So, okay, so, I think I've mentioned multiple times, there are a lot of strengths here. It's really excellent that you can read other people, that you can be so observant, that you can take in so many variables into account. But what the nodal axis here, this is what I'm reading, North Node is on the other side of the spectrum. It's in 2nd house Aries. So basically what it's saying is, initially in life, it may be very uncomfortable for you to be truly independent and autonomous and expressive of what you truly feel and want, not what anyone else wants, not, it's very simplistic, really. It may be very difficult for you early on because it's not familiar to you. It's actually more easy, and in a way it's almost more simple, or it comes to you more naturally to approach things from a more complicated perspective or approach. But what North Node in 2nd house Aries is indicating is that you do have a lot of potential. The more you can learn to express yourself in more of a black and white way, or operate from kind of a more selfish, in the moment way. This doesn't mean you have to be you have to ignore other people necessarily, or it's all about balance, right? That's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. You can still have all those strengths from South Node in Libra and your other Libra placements of being observant and attentive to others. Those are really great strengths, and being very rational, taking in many variables into account. You can still have all that, but also incorporate, you are a variable as well. I think oftentimes, Libra is the scales. So you're weighing these two things, thinking about these two things, but you need to put yourself in the equation as well. Libra is it's not even like the water bearer, Aquarius, where it's the person holding the water. Libra is the scales, so Libra is inanimate. It's the only sign that's depicted as an inanimate object. But you are not inanimate. You have a soul. You have needs. You have feelings. That's the challenge here with these Libra placements is learning to put yourself into the equation as well. If anything, you should probably be kind of the main variable to think of. Does that make sense? Hopefully I'm not making this more confusing. But yeah, operating from, a little bit of balanced selfishness. Certain selfishness can even be good with your relationships because, like I said earlier, if others don't know what you truly, feel or what your needs are, then how can they engage? When others engage with you, they want you to enjoy, presumably if they're not just a rude person, they want you to enjoy the experience as well. So the more you can, be expressive and, be expressive of what you truly want or don't like, what you agree with or don't agree with, the more you can do that, the more others can engage with you in kind of a raw, transparent sort of way. So this can actually strengthen your relationships, I think, and also learning to be direct. That's a big thing too. With South Node and these other placements in Libra, this shows that in past lives, you were more used to maybe operating from a very subtle type of way, because it's all about never ruffling any feathers. So if you did have an agenda, you would want to do it in a very kind of maybe even like secretive way. That's how Libra can be very manipulative too. Others don't even realize it. Libra doesn't even have the reputation of being manipulative because I think they're that kind of good at it. They're that good at just naturally blending in and, they are go with the flow, but they can, if they so choose, they can assert some kind of agenda while being very go with the flow and, therefore camouflaging. Does that make sense? So, and again, that's a strength too, but combine that with, being direct, just put yourself out there. Just, that's what Aries does. You in some ways you can learn from Aries because that's where your North Node is. So just being, it's very easy for them because they view things from very black and white. They have almost the privilege of not taking into account the far future or what is everyone else thinking or feeling. That's why they're so confident, because they're not dealing with nearly as many variables as you are. Their mind is more of a dictatorship and less of a bureaucracy. You have kind of a bureaucracy in your head at all times, which again can be very good, very advantageous for some situations. But it may be refreshing for you. It may be, especially when you're younger, it will be uncomfortable, but at the same time, it can be refreshing for you to embrace that kind of simplicity, if that makes sense. And otherwise, yeah, just being more self-focused, more independent. That's what second house Aries would be all about. What are your needs? What are your needs now and in the future? Maybe, it may benefit you to focus on yourself more. That's the bottom line there. So yeah, I told you a little bit about your past lives and then how that translates into a major challenge here. And I always say you've probably learned a lot about what I'm saying already. You probably know all this to some extent. Early in life, you may have struggled with being maybe kind of a pushover in some areas, or, just going with what everyone else wanted. And you'll naturally, you'll naturally get better at this with time. You'll naturally learn more about how to assert yourself when it's appropriate, when you feel comfortable. And the more you kind of go in that direction, the more, North Node indicates you have that potential there. You'll find more success by doing that. It may be more immediately comfortable for you to just focus on other people and be just kind of observant and even a wallflower. It may be immediately more comfortable to be that way, but it won't bring you your highest good. It will actually lead to your downfall if you go too much into that direction. Because you have to branch out. You have to evolve toward the North Node. Well, you don't have to, of course, but most people who are seeking readings from me and are interested in astrology are interested in their self-improvement. So that's that's the direction you would likely go, is more self-oriented, more autonomous, more expressive, things of that nature. Since we're talking about challenges and growth and evolution, let's talk about your Saturn as well. Your Saturn is in 11th house Sagittarius. So another challenge for you, especially early in life, would be interacting with the world. What I mean by that is Saturn is in Sagittarius, so definitely you'd be inhibited when it comes to traveling far or trying something completely new, immersing yourself in a completely new situation. Traveling is by far probably the best example of that, but even embracing yourself, embracing a completely new concept, a completely new paradigm, or a completely new culture. And by that I don't just mean racially, it could be that too, but even just socioeconomically, or embracing those who may have very different opinions, or those who may have a different outlook on life, different culture, in the sense a different lifestyle, something like that. These things may have been very there was something keeping you from exploring more in these areas and exploring and adventuring in life in general. These areas may have been very uncomfortable for you, or scary in certain ways, especially early in life. What else? Also, Saturn's in 11th house, so this has to do with the way you interact with the community and the public, online interactions, but also just being in public, being in the world. You do have Venus conjunct midheaven, so that would indicate you have really great personality, great presence in the world. You'd be generally well liked, but at the same time, a Saturn in the 11th house shows that you may have had insecurities or inhibitions when dealing with public interactions, coworkers, especially groups of people. You may have just been kind of shy, or maybe just not liked group interactions early on. So that is a challenge, because this, if you stay, how do I put this? It may be tempting, especially early in life, to just avoid these situations, avoid these themes. Don't travel, don't adventure, don't be around groups of people, don't be around the public. That would probably be the easiest option. But with Saturn, we tend to get better at these things with time, especially, of course, if we have free will, if we want to self-improve. This will get easier for you with time. I'm sure it's already gotten a lot easier. You've probably gotten a lot better at dealing with these types of situations, I would think. And the more you do kind of, what do they say, dip your toe into, or dip your foot, the more you do kind of gradually embrace traveling, adventuring, being in more group situations, and also it may be about doing it in a different kind of way that you're comfortable with, or finding the right type of adventure for you, finding the right type of group activity, or something like that. But the more you kind of embrace these types of things, you can actually be a leader in this area later on in life. That's typically how it goes with Saturn. Things start out very challenging and uncomfortable. The growth is slow typically, but with time you can actually master this area and become a leader there. Especially, by now you are in your 30s, I believe. So, the Saturn return happens in our late 20s, going into age 30, 28, 29, 30. we have some kind of increased responsibility or challenge. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Saturn return, but typically there's some kind of challenge there which forces or pushes us to confront these fears, inhibitions, challenges with, whatever area our Saturn is in. So for you, this may have had to do with branching out into a new lifestyle, a new belief system, new culture, new, maybe traveling far, something like that, embracing, and again, it could also have had to do with group situations, online activity, or probably some kind of combination of what I just said. Like something, this is just made up, it probably didn't happen, but something that would perfectly fulfill this would be like traveling far for a convention to go to, I don't know, something that you're interested in, that you've always wanted to go to, but you never had the time or money, or maybe you were afraid of group interactions or something. That would be a perfect example, or, something else that combines those themes. But anyway, typically we ideally rise up to some kind of challenge in our late 20s going into age 30, and then going into your 30s and beyond, it tends to get easier. And then, like I said, especially getting into the 40s, 50s, later in life, you can actually become a master in this area. You can become a master at adventuring, traveling, group interactions, things of that nature. And the reason why is, because you went through those trials and tribulations early on in life, you know what it's like not to have, not to embrace these things. And that's actually what makes you potentially better at it. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, that's another challenge for you. Those are the main challenges, really. Let's talk a little bit about your upbringing. So South Node is in Libra. That does have a lot to do with what we're like as kids. Typically with South Node in Libra, you would be a bit of a wallflower, maybe somewhat shy, very observant, very intellectual, very excellent when it comes to learning. And there's a little bit of passivity with that placement as well. So I think that actually makes it easier to go to school, because I find that more passive types actually thrive with school more, especially early in school, I think, because so much of it is about, doing everything in a very certain way. So coming, to that from a kind of passive and intellectual way of being, I think would be very advantageous. You may have thrived with that. What else? And you may have been kind of a people watcher, very curious, but again, kind of shy or removed. You may have been very interested in crafts or activities with your hands, reading, writing, creating things with your hands, designing something. I don't know. Like, obviously most kids are interested with toys and things like that, but for you, it would have been, you would have very much enjoyed these more like passive kind of activities. But again, North Node is an Aries, so that shows you do have potential to become more outgoing as you get older, for sure. The IC is in Taurus, actually. So I've had mixed results with this. What I've read about IC and Taurus is that you would have an upbringing that is very materialistic, very materialistically wealthy, but it may have been lacking emotionally. I've definitely met people, though, who had this placement, who had, very impoverished upbringings. But whatever the case may be, you likely had everything you needed materialistically. Let's just put it that way. But again, it may have been materialistic in nature growing up. Something may have been lacking emotionally, perhaps. With IC and Taurus, though, you may have been... there would typically be a bit of stubbornness with that placement as well. So you may have been kind of shy and introspective, but at the same time, very, very practical, maybe a little bit stubborn as well. Because typically we, as children, emulate the themes of our IC, and for you, IC is in Taurus. So definitely very practical child, very intelligent, mature for your age, because you wouldn't have been very emotional, really. Most, children we think of as being very emotional. You wouldn't really be like that. You'd be pretty practical, pretty analytical, even intellectual. And you would still have that even keel kind of theme that you still do now, very likely. It's interesting with astrology. We can see how some traits in our youth fade and turn into something else as we get older, and other traits just stay exactly the same. And I think in many ways you would be kind of like how you are today. You'd be very, pretty rational, go with the flow, but then also have a little bit of a stubborn side, and then very, very, very practical, very, have that very stable force to you. You are like that now. You'd very much be like that as a kid as well. You do have sun and moon are not opposing, but they're in opposing signs again. This means that you were born before a full moon. I think it would have been a full moon a day or two after you were born. So this means that we can see a little bit about the environment growing up. The environment may have been very, there may have been a lot of like conflict or chaos. It's not the word I'm looking. Contrast. That's the word I'm looking at. There may have been a lot of contrast in your environment growing up. Oftentimes with sun and moon and opposing signs like this, the parents are very different from one another. They have had different ways of relating to you, different expectations, different parenting styles. Even if you grew up with just one person, that person may have had a lot of contrast within themselves and behaved differently at different times. And you may have had one parent that was a little bit more grounded and practical, and then one that was kind of more extreme or emotional. So this is confusing, I think, for a child growing up. I think it presents you with a lot more to deal with, generally, a lot more to figure out. So that can be difficult, but it's also advantageous in the sense that it makes it so that you're naturally, it's very easy for you to understand multiple points of view at the same time because of your upbringing, because of your parents or whomever being, very different ways. You can naturally relate to someone even if they're experiencing something that you've never experienced, or you can understand where someone's coming from even if they are expressing a viewpoint that you disagree with. This is also really excellent when it comes to understanding advanced concepts, complex concepts, because again, you can understand multiple things in your head at the same time, sort of. So that is a difficult path, but it is potentially more advantageous, I think. Also because, okay, so again, stemming from this like contrast in your home, let's just say, this contrast is in you and it stays in you forever. So yes, you may be generally more like logical and analytical, but you do have sun in Scorpio, so you may sometimes still have those depths of emotion in your own kind of way. Maybe not to the degree that others with more Scorpio placements would have. But you can still experience that. So you may feel this like push and pull within yourself. I think this is also common with people who have Libra placements, to feel push and pull in yourself. But also part of this is having Sun and Scorpio with Moon and Taurus basically opposite. You have to satisfy both, and sometimes that can be very difficult because they are literally opposite in nature. Part of yourself may be very emotional and very sensitive, whereas the other part of yourself is very kind of grounded and stable and independent. So, it'll, with time, it gets easier to know how to find balance. And saying all this, I think, would be, from looking at a person such as yourself with placements like you have, from the outside, it looks like you're very stable, very grounded, but you may sometimes feel that there's this kind of inner chaos or dichotomy within you that you have to balance. Okay, let's talk about your career. And I know you expressed that you really are interested in compatibility. So, I definitely devote a big chunk of time near the end of the reading to that. But first, let's talk just briefly about your career a little bit and your reputation, things of that nature. So first, I like to just start out by, going over the different strengths that you have. I think probably the strength that stands out, or one of the strengths that stands out to me the most, would be you're so stable, you're so grounded. So this would be excellent when it comes to careers or projects that require time or dedication, consistency. Of course, that would be a lot of things. That doesn't narrow it down a lot, but anything. Well, and really, any career you could thrive at in some regard, because you have the ambition of Scorpio, but then the practicality and consistency of Taurus. So wherever you work, you can work there for many years, and just in your kind of stable, steady approach, you can climb up the ladder wherever you are, just kind of naturally. I would say without even trying, but it's not that there's not effort there. It's, you put in the effort every day in a very consistent kind of way, and that's what allows you to rise up, So that's a huge strength that I would say is one of your, probably greatest qualities. And again, it doesn't have to just be about work. It could be about, what are your long-term goals? You may be very goal-oriented, and it may be very natural for you to achieve some pretty impressive goals because of this steady approach. It's very advantageous. So that's a huge strength right there. The other probably main strength that I would think of, especially related to work or career, would be, very, very adaptable, very, you have a charisma. You are naturally great at handling people, working with people in a way that suits the context, whatever the context is. So whether that be social or like with work, if you have to be very professional, you would find that relatively easy. You'd be a natural with it, I would think. So, that makes me think hospitality. That makes me think, especially something that requires a lot of care or attention to detail. I could picture you. I don't even know who you are. I don't know anything about you, so this may sound strange, but I could picture you working in a very professional place, like really being a server at a really nice restaurant, for example, or I don't know, a spa or something. Whatever it is. Venus conjunct your midheaven adds to this as well. This means that you have a really great charisma. You have a really great presence in public and at work. So this would apply to online interactions, public interactions in general, and especially your reputation with your career. You just naturally come across in a way that is attractive to the public, attractive to, people of all walks of life. Others find you easy to relate to, easy to understand, even if they may not fully understand you on a deep level. They at least feel like they understand you, in that more shallow kind of context, I guess you could say, at work or in public. So again, that's really great. A lot of charisma, the stability and the charisma. And Venus conjunct midheaven doesn't just mean that others enjoy your presence in that capacity. Excuse me. It also means that you may thrive there as well. You enjoy, you find pleasure in being in public in some kind of way. You find pleasure with your work, with your career, with being online maybe. And then also with Venus, there does tend to be some element of luxury, or it can translate to money. So having Venus conjunct midheaven, it only makes sense with your, having fun, having pleasure in this area, and being pleasurable to others. There tends to be a lot of, potential for financial success as well, in your career, in your reputation, or from those things. So right off the bat, looks like you could thrive in a lot of different industries. Definitely something working with people. I would hate to take a chart like yours and then just lock you away somewhere in some kind of back office. I think that would be pretty sad. I definitely think you're someone meant to be working with other people, that you'd really thrive with that. What else can we talk about? Midheaven is in Scorpio though, so let's talk about that a little bit. That definitely steers this in a different direction. So with midheaven, with midheaven and Scorpio, midheaven is of course having to do mostly with the reputation and career and how you relate to the outer world. And with midheaven and Scorpio, this means that you may actually seek some kind of intensity in these areas. You may not necessarily have to. I've definitely known people who had midheaven in Scorpio who didn't necessarily have the most intense job, but you may be drawn toward areas that involve some kind of crisis, like being a paramedic or being an investigator, figuring out some kind of intense situation, being a like counselor, therapist, psychologist, psychoanalyst, psychiatrist, doing something which requires you to be like you could definitely take advantage of how you are so rational even in tense situations. I don't know how you'd feel about that though, because with your chart it does look like you would really, on the one hand, you don't typically enjoy conflict. You would, if anything, you'd be afraid of conflict. It'd make you uncomfortable. But there is a conflict in its, or a contradiction there, because midheaven and Scorpio would indicate that at least with your career, you may thrive with or be drawn to some level of conflict in that area. So I'm not sure. I think what I was saying is I do think you could thrive in some kind of critical area like that, crisis oriented area, because you are so even keel. You can be very stabilizing. So you would be like a really excellent psychologist, for example, or something psychological, working with people, because you are so understanding of others and understanding of complex information, understanding psychology, and you would provide a very like stabilizing energy for others who may not be stable, others who may be in a critical or very intense situation. So I can see you being good at a lot of things. That would be another thing where you'd be very professional as well. Something psychological, something providing a service for someone, working with people directly. Or again, I'm picturing like a server at a really high-end restaurant, because even that would be intense, but you would still have to remain very calm and professional. You'd be really good at that too. And I always say, like, with this part of the reading, I'm not necessarily trying to guess what you do for work. I'm just illustrating what types of careers you may find rewarding based on the themes that you're working with, the themes of that career. That's all I can see. I can't see what kind of, you have free will. You can do whatever job you want. But yeah, something involving the themes of working with others. And then also, you could take advantage of that stability that you have, that grounding energy that you have. And yeah, somewhere in there, you may be drawn toward critical, crisis, intense situations, something involving high amounts of stress or stressful situations, something like that. Okay, I'm going to move forward. So you wanted to know about romantic compatibility. Let's start out with Mars. I like to start out with Mars because really the points that I look to the most for attraction, compatibility, and the way your experience with relationships in general, what I look to the most for those are actually Venus and the descendant. But I do like to start with Mars because it does have a lot to do with attraction, like especially sexual attraction, sexual compatibility. What else? And then attraction as well. So for you, Mars is in Libra, so this means that you'd be attracted to someone that's a little bit more refined, a little bit more, how do I put it, like someone a little bit kind of sophisticated in their mannerisms. And I don't just mean that like that they're some like wealthy person, or they could be, but they may not have to be. I'm just saying someone who is like mature, kind of someone who is well thought out and maybe a little bit intellectual. That would be attractive for you. someone who is, the bigger person, who doesn't, who takes the high road. Someone, does that make sense? Someone who doesn't respond in like a crass or like really emotional type of way. Someone who's more mature. That's what would be attractive for you. So this definitely could be someone with Libra placements. That's where your Mars is. So, wherever your Mars sign is, that is potentially a sign, that's what you're attracted to. So you may be literally attracted toward people who have Libra placements. I do think this would work too, maybe for the long term, not just for shallow attraction, but also for something deeper. Because you have Mercury in Libra, this means that you would naturally communicate easily with people who have placements in those areas, because they'll think like you, they'll act a little bit like you in that regard. You'll relate to them very well. So Libra, you'd have that attraction. There could be a little bit of competitiveness because of Mars being there, but then again, you also have that really easy conversational tone. You can conversate with them very naturally, very you can have really engaging conversations, rewarding interactions. But even more than that, you have South Node in Libra too. So again, a lot of your deep past and where you come from and what you're familiar with is represented by Libra too. So that just indicates even more so that people who have strong Libra placements they'll come across familiar to you. You'll feel like you already know them. It's just because this is an energy that you've worked with time and time again. It's super easy for you. The one disadvantage there would be, especially if someone has placements near 1 degree Libra, if you want to get specific with it, if they have placements, in other words, conjunct your South Node, this may be too comfortable, it may be too easy, and it may actually draw you back to how you used to be. It may kind of actually stunt your growth in a way. This is often very comfortable for us. It's our comfort zone, but it can lead to our downfall, basically. So what else? South Node and Libra. Yeah, but otherwise, ultimately, I would still think of Libra as definitely a sign of potential for you. You've got the relating really well, attraction there. And I want to say, too, they don't literally have to have placements in Libra. They could just have traits that would be reminiscent of Libra. So being a little bit detached, being very usually easygoing, very chill personality, intellectual, intelligent, someone who thinks of others, someone who thinks before they act, someone who's excellent with social mannerisms, navigating social situations. That could literally be someone with Libra placements. It could also be another air sign though too. So Gemini or Aquarius may be very attractive for you as well. You may still have a lot of those benefits there too. They may come across familiar for you, easy to relate to, and even attractive as well, since they're similar to Gemini or to Libra. Aquarius, I'm definitely looking at more so than Gemini, because Aquarius is a fixed sign. You have Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Taurus. These are both fixed signs. Aquarius squares Scorpio and Taurus, so this means it is a contentious aspect. Many astrologers will just tell you, "Oh, you're incompatible with Aquarius," but I actually disagree. It's not that simple. Those who have strong placements with Aquarius, on the one hand, you will relate to them in some kind of way because you have your ascendant there. The way you approach situations is consistent and kind of detached, like Aquarius. So this may make it very easy for you to meet people with strong Aquarius energy. But also, even more than that, you'll be similar to them in the sense that you will both be strong-willed, stable, consistent, stubborn a little bit. You're not that stubborn. You can be pretty, I don't know, you have a lot of placements in your chart saying that you're very easygoing, go with the flow, and then you have other placements that say that you're stubborn. So maybe you're both somehow. But Anyway, okay, so meeting someone who has strong placements in Aquarius, they will be like that too. They'll be pretty, they can be kind of go with the flow, definitely detached, but they can also be kind of stubborn and set in their ways too. So meeting someone like that, you'll relate to them in the sense of being, they're definitely their own person. They're not going to compromise for you, and you would respect that because in some ways you are like that too. So the reason why I'm drawn to that for you is because you'd be similar enough to understand each other. You would understand and respect each other, although you may disagree oftentimes, and I don't think a relationship is about agreeing on everything. I think that's boring for many people, probably most people. And there has to be some kind of contention there, some kind of tension there to drive the attraction. Okay. Some kind of conflict. There has to be enough in common for you to relate to each other and understand each other and respect each other, but enough different, to drive the attraction. A little bit of contention. Does that make sense? So I do think you could find that with Aquarius for sure. They would be attractive to you. You could communicate with them very easily. You may disagree at times, but you understand and respect each other. They're strong-willed. They're not going to budge. You're strong-willed as well because of these fixed energies. So I do, I am potentially loving Aquarius for you. Libra for sure. Gemini, not so much, I don't think. Yes, Gemini is an air sign. It's intellectual, detached, easygoing, adaptable, like Libra. So in some ways, you could communicate with them well. There may even be some kind of attraction there with Gemini for you. But Gemini is mutable air. It's so scattered. It's all over the place. I really think that you would prefer someone else who initiates. You have ascendant in Aquarius. You have these Libra placements. This shows that you're wanting someone else who's strong-willed. You're strong-willed, but you're also very easygoing. You may not always be comfortable initiating, especially in like a romantic context. So I do think you're looking for someone maybe a little bit more fiery, more decisive, more, someone who puts themselves out there, someone very direct. I don't think you're going to find this with most people who have strong Gemini placements. Those who have Gemini placements, I think Gemini would be more of a friendship sign for you. You would relate to them really well. You could have really interesting conversations. But they are so scattered. They are so inconsistent, on a deep personal level. I don't think you'd relate, like you wouldn't relate when it comes to your lifestyle, for example, because you are so stable and consistent. They are not that at all. They're all over the place, and sometimes differences can be attractive, but I don't think this is a difference that you would be drawn to. I don't think this would be enriching for you or for them, really, so I'm definitely not in love with Gemini for you at all. But so far, just looking at your Mars sign, as well as some of your other placements, Libra and Aquarius for sure. Both of those look attractive for you. Okay, let's talk about your Venus placement. Venus is even more important than Mars, I would say, because Venus has to do with what you're attracted to, again. But it's also how you approach relationships as well, and what you find attractive. And it's also just your romantic experience in general. So what do you find romantic? What do you need in a person or a relationship for it to be romantic for you? So your Venus is in Sagittarius. This means that it's really important for you to find someone adventurous, to find someone who is maybe different or exotic in some way. Oftentimes with Venus in Sagittarius, you may be with someone from a different race, country, socioeconomic background, different religion, different way of thinking, different customs. That in itself may be very attractive to you. Someone, from a different place, from a different time, from a different way of thinking or living. That would be definitely very attractive to you just in general. But also the way you experience relationships and attraction is, adventurous too. So yeah, you may not be afraid to be with someone whose astrology is very different than yours too. Venus and Sagittarius. And also, okay, you're attracted to someone adventurous. You're attracted to, Venus and Sagittarius means you are attracted to Sagittarius, basically, or someone like that. So someone adventurous, outgoing, fiery, charismatic. And this strengthens what I was saying earlier about, you already have placements which indicate that you want someone else who takes the lead. I actually wasn't even looking at Venus and Sagittarius. That just expands that even further. You really want someone fiery, outgoing, someone decisive, someone who speaks with conviction, someone who, brave, like someone who's not afraid to, be kind of bold. That's what you want, I think. So you may find that with people who have Sagittarius placement, Venus and Sagittarius, you may be attracted toward people who have strong Sagittarius placements. And I would speculate, especially maybe early in life, you may have relationships with, you may date people who have strong Sagittarius placements. But taking the rest of your chart into account, I don't know if Sagittarius is mutable as well. It can be kind of scattered. Sagittarius is intellectual, so you can have really great kind of intellectual conversations with them. I don't think that's ultimately what you're necessarily seeking. Maybe it is. I could be wrong. But some of these other fire signs may be more attractive to you. I'm really looking to Leo. Your descendant is in Leo. So let's just start out by saying, Leo is fire like Sagittarius. So you'd still have, many the same reasons you'd be attracted to Sagittarius. You'd also be attracted to Leo or Aries since they are fire signs. Any of these signs would be fiery, spontaneous, fun-loving, adventurous. They live in the moment. They are natural when it comes to initiating. They're all pretty strong-willed. Mostly Aries and Leo, though. Sagittarius is a little more fickle. So definitely Aries or Leo look interesting for you. Leo in particular, you have your descendant there. Not a lot of people know a lot about the descendant. The descendant is always exactly opposite the ascendant. The ascendant is the eastern horizon when you're born. The descendant is the western horizon. Because you have Aquarius rising, this shows that the way you are, your identity and the way you are in relationships is you're the one who's more easygoing, detached. You are strong-willed, but you're strong-willed, but in a kind of detached, logical kind of way. You're strong-willed when it comes to your intellect. You want someone else who's strong-willed, but in a way that's more fiery, more outgoing, more transparent, more direct, more external, like someone who's really active with their environment. You may be more detached. You may kind of hang back a little bit, but you're wanting someone who's more active, who, is more instinctual, more animalistic, you could say. So really, descendant in Leo means that you have this attraction with Leo. Leo represents the kind of person that you best work with in a partnership. So not just romantic partnerships, but any other kind of partnership as well. Leo represents kind of what you expect, and just, you just naturally have this kind of potential chemistry with those who have strong Leo placements, or, like I say, those who have traits reminiscent of Leo. So someone who's consistently fiery and outgoing. Leo is fixed fire. And this is also another reason why I'm really drawn to this for you, is because, the same reason I liked Aquarius, I like Leo maybe even more for you, because, again, Leo, like Aquarius, it has squares. It squares your sun and moon. It squares Scorpio and Taurus. So, again, Leo's going to be strong-willed like you. They're not going to budge on certain matters. They're going to be their true, authentic self very easily, kind of like you, I think, in many ways. So you'll relate to those areas. You'll understand and respect Leo because of that. But there's enough difference there that, to keep things interesting. They are a lot more fiery and outgoing than you probably are. They're, I think I kind of went over that already. They take the lead. They're not afraid to stand out. They're not afraid to be bold, and they're constantly acting in the moment. They're constantly acting off the cuff. They're very comfortable doing so. So, of course, astrology is not as simple as just saying, this is one sign for you. Of course, everyone has many placements in their chart just like you do. That's pretty obvious. But if I had to just go for one sign for you, the best chemistry for you, I would say Leo. Not only would you have potential long-term compatibility there, you'd also be attracted to them, and I think you'd find them attractive because they're stable like you, but in different ways than you. So similar enough to understand and respect them, different enough to maintain some kind of tension to keep the attraction up. Also, again, with your Libra placements, those who have strong Libra placements, I find almost always want someone, they typically like Aries. Aries, for example, could be attractive too. I like Leo better, I would say, but Aries may be attractive for you as well, just because, again, they are, they take the lead, they take the initiative. I do think you're looking for someone who takes the lead, who's very decisive like that, very commanding, and very adventurous too. You want that sense of adventure. So you'll find all of that with Aries. The only difficulty, I think, with Aries is that they will not have, the way they operate life is so impulsive. It's different. It would very much contrast from your stability. You are so stable. Aries are not stable, I would say, as a sign. Of course, you can find examples that contradict what I'm saying. I'm not saying every person with an Aries placement is unstable, but as a sign, it's very unstable. Leo is going to be the best of both worlds for you, where they are fiery, spontaneous, outgoing, they take the lead, but they're still stable. They want some level of consistency, and you are extremely consistent. So I'm really looking at Leo. Aries or Sagittarius could be attractive. They'll be fun, they'll be adventurous, they'll take the lead. Those are all checkpoints in my head for you. But again, they're just not stable though. So I don't know how compatible you'd be long-term with them, because they're going to be all over the place. I think you'd drive each other crazy after a while. So far we talked about basically the fire and air signs, because that's where your Venus, Mars, and descendant are. You have Mars in Libra, which is air, Venus and descendant in Sagittarius and Leo, which are fire. So the main thing, I'm really looking at the fire signs more than any of the other elements for you romantically, for sure. Definitely the fire signs, Leo more than the others. Second to Leo, I would say Aquarius would be really interesting. Someone with Aquarius in their chart as well. Of course, everyone is a mixture of many different energies usually. But yeah, Aquarius or Leo. I know I keep saying this over and over again, but you have enough in common to understand and respect them. They're stable and a little bit stubborn and strong-willed in many ways that you are. But they're going to be different enough to drive the attraction there. Libra would be more of a friendship dynamic, though. You'll relate to them on a friend level. So I think that would be even more stable for you, but also potentially more boring. Leo's going to be a little bit more dramatic and exciting, but also potentially more unstable. And of course, you could have someone with placements in both. You could have someone with major placements in Leo and Aquarius, and that could be, that could work out maybe. But generally speaking, Aquarius, definitely some potential for romantic compatibility, but leaning toward friendship. Leo is more, I think, less friends, I would say, more attractive, generally speaking. Okay, and then yeah, we went through the air and fire signs, so let's talk about the earth and water signs real quick. Starting out, I'm just gonna say I'm definitely not drawn to them. That's why I haven't even talked about them yet, because I'm really not. They don't stand out to me. Which should we do first? Let's do water signs, since you do have Sun in Scorpio. I kind of don't see you as a Scorpio really, but yeah, let's talk about the water signs. If anything, I would say you have kind of a lack of water in your chart, despite having Sun in Scorpio. there's nothing else going on. You have Pluto and Scorpio as well, but there are no other planets or even major points. You do have midheaven in Scorpio, but there's really not a lot going on, especially in Cancer or Pisces. Really not much going on over there. So, okay, the way this goes, you could actually be attracted to these signs because they're so different than how you are. They're so emotional, especially they can be, what do they say, like they wear their hearts on their sleeves, particularly Pisces and Cancer. They just wear their hearts on their sleeves. They're so openly emotional at times, mostly Pisces, but sometimes Cancer too. So this could, you could react to this in one of two ways. You could react to this as saying like, kind of this may be very uncomfortable for you. You are not this way. So, why would you be attracted to someone else that is like that? But it could go the other way too. This could be so different than what you're used to. If it's done in a certain way, it could be very exotic, very different, very attractive. Opposites attract, like they say. And we do tend to draw out whatever element we lack in other people because, if you can overcome the differences, it can be mutually beneficial, potentially. They could show you how to incorporate more like creativity and imagination, maybe more emotion into your life if you want those things. And you can show them how to you can provide your stabilizing, grounding, practical, rational energy to them. So it could potentially be really mutually beneficial. The potential difficulty there is you have such different needs. You're so different. It's going to be very difficult to maintain, especially a long-term romantic relationship, particularly with Cancer or Pisces. So I could see some maybe potential attraction there, maybe. But overall, it's going to be real difficult. It could be mutually beneficial in some kind of way, but I think this would be really better as kind of like a friendship or an acquaintance where you come together and you can mutually benefit from your differences. I think a shallower relationship like that may be more beneficial, but a one-on-one romantic relationship with one of these signs I just think would be difficult to maintain for sure. Scorpio, you may relate a little bit more, so I think in my mind that increases the chances of you being friends maybe with Scorpio. But still, like we talked about in the beginning, they're going to be so emotionally intense. You are really not like that. You are, so grounded and rational. Even though you have Sun in Scorpio, I think for the most part, you're not really going to relate to Scorpio either. So the water signs, with some caveats, I generally would say, you're not going to relate to them. I don't see what would be, if anything, I could see water signs being attracted to you more than you'd be attracted to them because you are so stabilizing, you're so grounding. People who are very emotional want to be grounded. They seek that. So, I tend to find that those who have strong water placements, they are attracted to earthy placements. You have Moon in Taurus, they may be really drawn to that stability. And you're also very sensual, they would be drawn to that as well. But for you, though, I don't see what the allure would be with the water signs. Let's talk about the earth signs a little bit. So you do have Moon in Taurus. Not much else going on there, though. Some outer planets in Capricorn. Not much at all going on in Virgo. So, okay, Moon is in Taurus, so that is a strong enough placement, and Moon does have a lot to do with our feelings and our deep down personality, our inner personality, as they say. So it will be really refreshing to meeting, for example, another person who has Moon in Taurus or someone who has Sun in Taurus. That would be easy for you. You'll relate to each other on a deep level. There'll be a deep understanding there, so that could be a really great dynamic for a friendship, or maybe something more than that too. Of course, it gets complicated because, I could see it working. Let's say someone has Sun in Taurus with Moon in Leo. That could potentially be really attractive. Mixing Taurus with Leo or maybe Aquarius or maybe some kind of other dynamic. That could be really potentially romantic. I think that could work romantically maybe for you. But Taurus on its own, I mostly see as friends. I guess I don't know. There is a potential for a deep connection there. I guess just in general, romantic or otherwise, maybe a deep friendship, because of your moon there. And then to a lesser extent, you could apply that to Virgo and Capricorn as well. They do, of course, have a lot in common with Taurus. Virgo or Capricorn are going to be earthy, practical, down to earth, very steady, very stable. I think Virgo and Capricorn are a little bit less stable than Taurus, though. So again, you may find some kind of comfort there or deep understanding to some level, but not the same that you would find with Taurus, though. With Taurus, it's really going to be in your face. It's really going to be a strong, potentially a strong connection, depending on their other placements. My cat just entered the room. That's what that squeaking was, if you heard that. But Virgo and Capricorn, I don't really see working really. Virgo, it's interesting how Virgo interacts with Libra placements. You have a lot of Libra placements, so that's part of the equation for sure. On the one hand, Virgo is intellectual like Libra, so you could definitely engage with them intellectually, have some deep, conversations, maybe some really interesting conversations, but I don't think this is romantically attractive for you. I mean, Virgo is stable in some ways, but it's also kind of constantly changing. I don't see you really drawn toward people that are changing a lot, changing their minds. You can already be, indecisive sometimes, or you have a lot on your mind. You don't need another person who also has a lot on their mind and is, complicated like that. You know what I mean? You could be with someone maybe very deep or very, sophisticated in that kind of way, but someone, Virgo can be very indecisive, and it's just not, I don't see that being attractive for you at all. You want someone more bold and strong-willed, and someone who takes the reins, someone who's decisive. So Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, something like that. But yeah, Virgo, they're not gonna be like that. They're gonna be much more modest and kind of slow to act. They don't usually take the lead either. And then Virgo does have a lot that's different from Libra as well. Particularly with like social graces, Virgos tend to be a little bit awkward. I don't think you would enjoy that really. You yourself look like someone who thrives with interactions, and you want someone fun, you want someone outgoing. So Virgo, it's kind of like a hermit sign. I don't see the attraction there. If anything, I could see maybe like a friendship or an acquaintance. But for like a really deep friendship or romantic connection, I just don't really see. Maybe a friendship, because they do have a little in common with you. But romantic connection, I don't see that. Same with Capricorn. Capricorn, you're gonna relate to, because they're ambitious, they're practical, they're very grounded. So you'll relate in those ways, but I don't know. Especially from a romantic context, there's just nothing there suggesting that you'd be attracted to. Capricorn can be very serious, and they're very, responsible. They're not gonna be really fun and adventurous. I think if anything, they may actually kind of kill, your love of adventure. You love. Like, you would love to go on a cruise with your significant other, or vacation to a country you've never been to. You want to have experiences, you want to try new things with your person. You want to get out there, you want to adventure. Capricorn is not going to be your best sign for that. Capricorn wants to just kind of stay at home or be working. So I know that was a little bit rambly, but hopefully that gives you an idea. To me, I would look at Aquarius or Leo or maybe Taurus. The fixed signs, pretty much, other than Scorpio. yeah, these fixed signs, they're going to be strong-willed. Leo in particular is going to make the first move. I'm really looking at Leo more than the other sign. Definitely let me know what you think if you want to continue. I don't know. You mentioned you were interested particularly in compatibility, so I don't know if that kind of gives you something to think about, if that answers your query, or if you had more thoughts, if you had more questions, definitely feel free to ask me. We can keep emailing, or I've even done follow-up videos before. If you had any thoughts or questions on that. But yeah, hopefully that gives you something to work with for sure. Okay, and then just to wrap this up, this is getting really long actually. At this point, I just like to look around, make sure I covered everything. I really do think well, there's two things I actually didn't really address. So you do have Sun conjunct Scorpio. You may come across more Scorpionic than you actually are. You may come across kind of intense at times. Others may sense that you have like a kind of magnetism about you. This is common with Sun and Scorpio and Sun conjunct Pluto, which you have both. So it's interesting because on the one hand, you are so charismatic, you're so relatable, others enjoy your company. But at the same time, you come across mysterious, you can come across intense, you come across like you have some kind of plan or agenda. Like others feel like you're very powerful and there's like something going on in your mind, even when there may not even be anything there. You may just be casually going about your life, but others look at you and they say like, oh, that person's powerful, that person's got something going on in their mind that I can't see. There's part of you that's unreachable. And so others find that attractive, they find it compelling. Okay. And then Aquarius rising, it just occurred to me, I made it pretty much the whole reading without talking about the rising, other than briefly in the compatibility part of the reading. So with Aquarius rising, that just means you come across like an Aquarius. So you come across kind of modest, but I find that there tends to be a quiet rebelliousness with Aquarius placements. So you may be... it's funny because I think for the most part you are kind of constantly operating from within the constraints of what's expected and what's socially acceptable. You're constantly aware of these boundaries and sort of unspoken rules or expectations. But at the same time, I think you would very much enjoy maybe kind of pushing those boundaries when it's appropriate or when it's safe. Because of your Aquarius rising and your Sun in Scorpio, you may have kind of a quiet or modest rebelliousness to you, I would say. Also with Saturn, with Aquarius rising, this means that you want to come across as a leader. Something about you is kind of authoritative, and even if it's leading in the sense of leading as an example, I think would be a lot of it. Because in many ways you just want to kind of do your own thing. But you definitely would, well, obviously no one would like being talked down to, but you especially though, because you see yourself as being very mature, which you are. You think things through. You have a kind of practical wisdom about you. And so, part of you wants to be perceived as such as well, as a leader, I think. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, but that's what I see with your chart. This is, I don't know why I went over. This reading got a little long, but definitely let me know your thoughts, any questions or feedback you have. I'm always open to. But yeah, that's what I see. So hopefully that gives you something to think about for sure. Okay, but yeah, thank you for this opportunity to read your chart, and hope you find that interesting.